Thank you very Thank you very much for joining us for part 3 of this suite of presentations and webinars about speech sounds in your children, in your settings. So we've worked on typical development so far. We've worked on atypical development and what things we shouldn't be seeing. And tonight is the real sort of, well, what can I do about this? Okay. So the first thing I would say is always be guided by your child's speech and language therapist if you have one on board. But if you don't have one on board, these are for you in terms of thinking in more general terms about things that you can be doing in your setting to maximize speech sound outcomes in your children. Okay, still people coming in, so I'm just letting them in as we get going. So again, as usual, just a quick recap. Zoom housekeeping rules, cameras on or off. I really don't mind. It's the evening time. We're all probably feeling a little bit tired by now. So if you feel more comfortable with your camera off, that's fine. But do please keep yourselves on mute at all times unless you're contributing to the Q&A. If you do have a burning question that you think of as we're going through, please do feel free to type it straight into the chat box as we're going. I won't obviously address it until the end, but obviously it means that you've put it out there for us to have a look at. So yeah, but please keep yourselves on mute so that I don't hear anything going on at home or in your setting. Come and go as you need. We may have children at home, pets at home, need a cup of tea, whatever. Please do what you have to do. Slides will be emailed to you, so please don't worry too much about making lots of notes. Okay, it will all come back to you, and these will be recorded. Tonight's webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded onto YouTube. So again, you can revisit it if you need to. So as usual, just a quick word about the Reach Out team. So the Stronger Practice Hub team consists of Damon, Victoria, Jess and Lisa. Tonight we have Damon and Lisa who have kindly joined us online. And just a quick note about the early years evidence store, which we've talked about before. But this is a great hub, you know, an online hub for all of your best practice and evidence-based, just in case you either are finding out something new, maybe if you're newer in your career, or if you just kind of want to check that you are working in line with best practice currently and up-to-date evidence. It's all there. So please do feel free to go and check that out at any point. It's very, very helpful. Okay. So here we go. The first thing I wanted to talk about when we're thinking about how to intervene with children who have unclear speech is phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Now, you may well have heard of these terms, but basically, phonological awareness is the ability to recognize and manipulate the spoken parts of words. And that we're thinking about syllables, onset rhyme and phonemes, so those speech sounds as well. So phonemic awareness is the ability to identify and manipulate individual sounds in spoken words. Now, both of these skills are key for getting children ready to read. So if you're working with children who are in preschool years, this is really useful, but it's also incredibly useful for children with unclear speech. So basically, recognizing different sounds and different parts of words leads to the ability to manipulate the sounds and parts of words. So how does this feed into our children who have got unclear speech? So phonological awareness is a big umbrella term for thinking about word awareness, speech sound awareness, syllable awareness, rhyme awareness, awareness of the first sound of a word, and also awareness of alliteration. And we see children playing with this all the time in setting quite organically. So, you know, you hear children and they're calling each other Connie Bonnie or Jonah Wona or something like that because they're experimenting. That is a child just kind of organically experimenting with phonological awareness. Now, a lot of children with unclear speech do have phonological awareness difficulties. And the impact of that is obviously, first and foremost, the one we can see most clearly is unclear speech. They also have difficulty hearing what people say and discriminating between certain sounds. Now, a lot of miscommunication comes because many words produced by the child may sound exactly the same. And that can be a real issue for parents and for professionals alike. Later on, there's difficulty with literacy and reading, difficulty maintaining friendships or even making friendships if speech is that unclear. They may need more time to produce a response, and this all may lead to frustration and low self-esteem. So the reason that phonological awareness difficulties cause speech sound disorders is because these children are unable to hear or think about the differences between the units of sound in speech. So they're unable to produce them correctly. It's a little bit like we said with children who have glue ear or with children who have any kind of hearing loss. If you can't hear the sound, you're going to find it very hard to make the sound. And it's a similar kind of thing, but a phonological awareness difficulty isn't always linked to a hearing loss. And obviously, if they can't hear the errors in their speech, they don't understand why what they're saying isn't being understood by the listener. And they can't understand why they're not able to make their needs known. But also, because these children don't have a fully formed speech and language system, they also lack the strategies to kind of circumnavigate this communication breakdown. So it really falls to us to think, okay, well, how can we help this child to make themselves better understood? So I wanted to think about that first. First things first, actually, what do you do if you don't understand a child in setting? I get asked this all the time, okay? Fine, I want to do some intervention and that's okay. But when they're asking me something and I don't know what they're saying, I need some practical strategies. Okay, that is kind of your first things first. And this is a really, really nice visual produced by Worcestershire Speech and Language Therapy NHS service that kind of summarises the best things to do. The first thing to do is don't pretend to understand when you don't, when you don't. Children know, and they know, and it doesn't help long term. So it's a really tempting thing to do when you're in setting and you're busy, but please try not to do that. Be sympathetic, take some of the blame. So I always do that. I'm always saying, goodness me, I'm such an old lady. I've got really old lady ears and they just don't always work. Try and say it again to see whether we can, get my ears working. Oh, so difficult being old, that kind of thing. Shoulder some of the blame. Ask the child to show you if they can. Sometimes just a little nudge to go, well, can you take me to it? Can you show me a picture of it? Can you show me the item? Always go back to the last thing that you did understand. Firstly, because it's quite empowering for the child. And secondly, because it gives you a starting point. So go, oh, I'm sure I heard you say mummy, but I'm not quite sure what you wanted to tell me about mummy. Okay. Try and look for clues. Maybe, is it something that you wanted to do with mummy? Or is it somewhere that you want to go with mummy? Just play detective. Sometimes that's all you're going to be able to do. If you still can't understand, I think you just had to say, I'm really sorry. I just don't know what you're saying. Maybe we can ask mum for some help when she collects you. Okay. And I think sometimes you have to do that, but it's a much nicer thing to do than pretending that you understand when you don't. If you're finding this problem crops up a lot, I think a homeschool book is really useful because it just gives you an idea perhaps of something that they might have been doing at the weekend or something that they were doing the evening before. Again, what you're just looking for is little starting points that you can use. Now, before you start on speech sounds, it can be really useful to work on just listening. The temptation with a child who is finding it really, really hard to make their sounds is to launch straight in on going ba, 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 pa, 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 la, la, la. But actually, listening is really the root of what you need to be working on. And I think before you start on speech sound games, it's really useful to work on just general listening games. So I really like working on rhythm with children. So just tapping a rhythm and getting them to copy the rhythm can be incredibly good as an initial sort of call and response game. I do something, you do something, we're listening, and then we're copying it. And that's very useful, again, because it's a great lead into syllables and the rhythm of speech. Animal noises games are also super. Match the animal noise with the animal. There's loads of animal bingo kind of games, animal sound bingo games. Environmental sounds are brilliant as well. Really, really good. So you can either do that as a game, so listening to some environmental sounds and then, you know, naming what they are. Or I think I've spoken about them in previous webinars, go on a listening walk around your setting. So really listen to and describe some of the sounds in the setting, run the tap, try and think of some great adjectives to go around, you know, what that sounds like. You know, is it a big sound, a small sound, a sharp sound, a calm sound, a flat sound, anything like that, which gets them listening to the qualities of sound that isn't necessarily speech. Musical statues is also really good. Anything where you're listening to music and listening for it to stop. And that's probably, you know, one of the simpler ones for children as well. So this gets them kind of really using their ears and learning to listen. Because when you're working on syllable level or rhyme level games, you're going, right, have a good listen. But you'd be surprised how many children don't actually know what they have to do when you're saying, have a good listen. So if you can do that with something that isn't speech sounds, it's a beautiful foundation for ongoing work. Now, starting to work on this intelligibility, so the clarity, it all starts with this phonological awareness if you're in early years. And the best one by far to start with is syllables, okay? So what is a syllable? So I'm sure you all know this, but I thought I'd pop it in anyway, just in case. And so it's the number of beats in a word. So you've got cat, apple, zebra, banana. Now, when I was putting this presentation together, I Googled what is a syllable, not because I didn't know what one was, but I wanted to find a nice visual like this. And I stumbled across some very, very, very detailed things, very detailed visuals about it. And I think I just wanted, in case you guys were going to think about cascading it down to anybody else in your team or any other people that you work with, and you were going to Google what is a syllable, this is too complex. Please don't get bogged down in this level of complexity. Don't worry about all of this. Just stick with it's the number of beats in a word. Okay, otherwise you're going to get too bogged down in stuff. So how is syllable number helpful? So consider the child who maybe is saying ba for ball, ba for balloon, and ba for blanket. After intervention with syllables, perhaps they're still not producing those sounds correctly, but let's think about how much easier it is to understand the words. So ba for ball, ba-oo for balloon, ba-e for blanket. They're going to be much, much easier to understand than the first version. Again, I often use the example of the word butterfly. If I've got a child going bye, that's much easier for me to understand than buffy, because I've got the right number of syllables. And that's something that as listeners, we really, really hinge on. We really hinge on the rhythm of the speech and the rhythm of the sentence or phrase. And without the correct syllable number, it can be very, very difficult to kind of hinge on to what that child is saying. But how to do that? And as you know by now, I'm very, very keen on working on things that aren't going to, make you reinvent the wheel and sit up till midnight making new resources. So, I'm hoping that this will stop that from happening. So when you're working in syllables, the easiest thing you can do is, if you do a who's here today, is clap the syllables of the names of the children. So who's here today? It's Dean. Who's here today? It's Elizabeth. Who's here today? It's Peter. And you're getting a very organic, simple, and meaningful exposure to syllables while you're just going about your business of just the sort of taking the register, as it were. Think vocabulary and curriculum links. Perhaps use vocabulary from the current book you're reading. So you've got maybe, Gruffalo and mouse and the deep dark wood. Things like that. Use the things that you're doing anyway. So think about your season words. If you're currently doing things about summer, you might be using words like sunshine or seaside or hot. Not this summer, obviously, but another summer you might be. And also any current affairs words or celebration words. So obviously Christmas is brilliant. If it's someone's birthday, that's brilliant. If you've got any particular, I don't know, like the coronation that we had, didn't we? Anything like that, link it in and pull it into whatever you're doing. You don't have to have new and exciting things that you've gone out to buy. Because actually, if you're doing it about words that you're doing anyway, it's far more functional and it's far more meaningful to the children anyhow. I love using Play-Doh. If you are thinking about doing some actual sort of sit-down activities with your children, squishing balls of Play-Doh is great. So maybe have 4 balls of Play-Doh, and then as they're saying the words, they squish a ball for each syllable. So that's a really lovely one. So hippopotamus. That was quite a long one. I would maybe not go straight in for that one. But pineapple, and they're squashing the ball each time. Again, it's a really nice sort of tactile way of getting the feel for those. A lot of people are tempted to get a child to say the word and then either beat it out or squish the Play-Doh and then go, great, how many syllables was that? I think for your early years children, that's one step too far. That's an awfully big task. And even children in sort of reception in year 1 find that tricky, because you're asking them to say the word, beat out the word or squish out the word, hold it in their head, recount the syllables, and then generate a number. And that can actually be really, really difficult. That is a huge, huge load on a child's working memory. So don't ask them necessarily to tell you how many it was without some form of scaffold there. Instruments are brilliant for syllable work. Get at any of your percussion stuff. So I really like using these. So your kind of shaky blocks. These are really lovely. And actually these lend themselves to syllables beautifully, because you've got not only the colour, but you've also got the shape. So I've got a yellow circle, which is a great 4-syllable. Never be afraid of putting 2 words together to form your multi-syllabic things. So again, I've got an orange rectangle, and you can use these for shapes, but you can also you can use these for shaking your syllables out. But actually, they're great if you really don't want to think about anything much particularly that day. Actually, you've got a fully formed activity just there by talking about the colour and the shape of each one. So they're really, really good. And children love making music and getting the instruments out. So by all means, use them to combine with your speech therapy work. Clapping. I mean, everybody, you know, can just default to clapping. If you're out somewhere at the park and or on a little visit or in the garden and you think, oh my goodness, something's lending itself brilliantly here to some syllable work, but I haven't got anything on me, clap or tap. That's always absolutely fine. Making it physical can add a real new, exciting slant, particularly for our children who aren't sitters. So I've got some really great sort of dinosaur feet that I use, and we sometimes stomp out the syllables. Perhaps you could bounce on a big yoga ball, you can actually, or a space hopper, and then you can bounce the words out yourself. Frogs jumping on lily pads is a classic as well. You can jump along the lily pads while you're saying the words too. So these really do lend themselves again to doing speech work outside as well as inside. And they're really good for those children who perhaps enjoy a slightly more whole body experience rather than sitting at a table and just kind of squishing with Play-Doh. So that can be very useful too. Other things I like that I've brought along with me tonight is if they're not scared of it, something like Crocodile Dentist, where perhaps you can push down the number of teeth with the syllables. So you might go crocodile, okay, and make a game of it like that. That's a really good one. The other ones that you can use, wooden pegboards are absolutely super for this. So most of these lend themselves beautifully to syllable work. So I've got an ambulance, I've got a fire engine, cement mixer, taxi, bus. So I've got a nice variety on that one. And also this nice sort of bugs are great. Bugs are really, really good for syllables. There's just so many. So you've got butterfly, dragonfly, caterpillar, ant, moth, grasshopper. So these are really, really wonderful. A lot of people tend to go straight for dinosaurs because they've got longer names. But actually, and this is a really good pointer, is don't shy away from one syllable words. If you only ever work on 2, 3, and 4 syllable words, children start to make one syllable words into 2 syllable words. So instead of going cat, they start to go cat or dog because they think they all have to have more than one clap. So don't shy away from it. The other really good one is if you're doing shopping. If you have a shop in your setting, a pretend shop, all of the lovely things that you can be buying in the shop, you can clap out the syllables for those as well. So that's a really good one too. Something else I like to use is pop-up pirate. Whoops, pop-up pirate. So you might win the number of swords that are in the amount of syllables. So that's another really nice one too. Might have a look more at this at the end. So the other benefits of working on syllables. So the evidence is that better phonological awareness leads to better reading and spelling outcomes at school age. So actually any work that you're doing on phonological awareness for a child with unclear speech will also be having benefits to all of the children in your setting. So I think don't kind of save it for the child who has unclear speech. Don't take them away from the other children and do it with them. Do it with everybody because it will actually benefit everybody. Now, the next thing is anecdotal. I couldn't find any evidence as such to back it up. But in sort of my 19 years of practice, what I've noticed is when I work on syllables with children, they begin to sort of subconsciously start to monitor their own speaking. There becomes this kind of realization of how I'm saying it isn't the same as how she's saying it. Because they're starting to critically listen to the units of words. And they're starting to go, oh, okay, so I need to do it differently. And what you tend to find, or what I've tended to find in my practice, is that other errors can, not always, but can start to kind of spontaneously remediate as well. And people come back going, oh, well, I've just noticed that they're making more sounds. They're just making a better variety of sounds, as well as the sort of, syllable impact. And I think that's because children do just start to listen more. And at the start, we said children who aren't listening can't make the sounds. If you teach them to listen, everything starts to snowball. So that's a really good benefit of working on syllables. The next big one that I think is really well placed for earlier settings is rhyming, okay, which is something that we obviously do an awful lot of. I really like the idea of partner cards. So you don't have to have the written form, but perhaps give each child a card and they have to find somebody who rhymes with their card. So if they're the sheep, they might be walking around going, you're a king, sheep, they don't rhyme. Or book, sheep, no, they don't rhyme. Oh, hang on, you've got the picture sleep, sheep, yes, we rhyme. And you're partnering up the children and they're having to listen and work together to find who their rhyming partner is. And I think that's a really good fun game if you've got a group who are big enough to do that. Rhyming baskets are good, or what's in the bags or what's in the box. Anything like that, where you've just got a load of stuff with pairs or trios of things that rhyme, and it's all about sorting them into rhyming. Playing with names, I mentioned that at the start, didn't I? See if they can just, rhyme each other's names. Edward, Bedward, Connie, Bonnie, anything like that. Just have some fun with it. And then, there's always the orchard games like Slug in a Jug, which actually you can use to play the partner game as well. So again, don't go out and buy partner cards and Slug in a Jug. Just use Slug in a Jug for that. Okay. So rhyming is really, really useful. I think you need to remember that working on speech with a child with a speech disorder is hard. It's really hard. And I just want you guys to reflect, maybe not now, but later. Think about something that you find really hard and how it makes you feel when you have to try over and over again to get it right. How long is it until you get frustrated? It's probably not particularly long, particularly if you're in a noisy place with lots of other people who are finding it really, really easy. If a child is finding production difficult, don't underestimate how useful listening tasks are. I think a lot of people think, oh, the child just won't make the sound, or they just won't say it, or they just can't do it. Fine, go back to listening. Always go back to listening rather than just stopping, and always go back to listening rather than pushing forward when you have a child who's very clearly unhappy. Because the impact of working on a child with a speech disorder when they're finding it difficult and they just can't do it is that their confidence will plummet. And it's very, very hard to re-engage a child whose confidence has plummeted so low that they have no confidence in their ability to make the sounds, even with the right intervention. So always revert back to listening if you're getting that feeling that that child is just not able to do what you want them to do. So effective ways of listening then. Minimal pairs are really useful. Minimal pairs are words that sound almost the same but differ in one sound. So if you have a child who has a speech and language therapist and they're working on particular sounds or particular processes, very likely your speech and language therapist will provide you with a list of the best pairs to work on. And it might be something like tap and cap, light and white, ring and wing, anything like that. If a child is missing the ends from words, so that final consonant deletion that we've talked about before, that is quite common, working on words that have the presence or the absence of a final sound can be really key. Children need to know that the word moo and the word moon means something different. They need to know that that final sound on the end actually marks a difference in meaning, a difference in the word. So like pie or pine, buy and bite, be and beat, so that they start to hear that, oh, that final sound on the end, it does a thing. That final sound on the end makes that word not be anymore. It makes it something different. And when a child starts to realize that, lots of things happen. They may not be able to make a t, but they'll probably start to put something on the end. I've got a little boy at the moment who can't say his k, but a book has become a book. And he's putting a little something there because he knows there needs to be a little something. And I can't make that, but I can make something that's an attempt at it. And actually, when you put that in a sentence or a phrase, that is enough to make it clearer. It's not perfect, but it's clearer. So I just wanted to think about some ways that you can work on minimal pairs, because it's actually quite boring. It's very, very helpful, but it can be quite boring. So you just basically put the two sounds in front of you, or the two words in front of you as a picture. And perhaps you might get two of these fidget poppers, and then maybe the child pops one down for the one that they've heard. Okay. The other one that they absolutely love, and if you can laminate your pictures, all the better, bingo dabbers. If you've got children and you're working on minimal pairs, just buy bingo dabbers. Or if, like me, you actually go to bingo, just bring your bingo dabbers along with you, because children love to dab. It's just their favourite thing. So you just get them to dab the one that you've said, and there will be hours of fun there, guaranteed. Bingo dabbers is the way forward. If you haven't, get yourself to B&M and get some dabbers. Blocks are great. So Lego blocks or wooden blocks. We're going to build a tower. You put a block on the one that you've heard. Simply build them up and up and up and up and up. Which word is going to win? Which word is going to get the bigger tower? Anything like that can be really, really helpful, just to make it that little bit more interesting. Okay. The other thing that children love to do is they love to listen to the adult, and they love to tell the adult whether they've done something right or done something wrong. So again, you can take maybe just one of those words. If we think about the word moo and moon, if you're holding up the word moon, you can say it correctly and incorrectly, and you can get these really lovely little paddles. And if you say it incorrectly, they've got to tell you were wrong. Children absolutely adore telling grown-ups they were wrong, particularly when they've been given permission to do so, or that they can tell you if you're right. So again, it's about another way of them listening and monitoring the speech of somebody else. If your child would like to have a go at the talking side of it, by all means, let them have a go. Always offer them, say, oh, shall we swap places? Would you like to be the teacher now? Would you like to say the words? And I'll point to the one that I can hear you say. If they find it too difficult, fine, go back to listening. But if they do want to have a go, really, really praise that. So hopefully I've given you some ideas on things that you can do in your setting that won't, that aren't too revolutionary and won't cause you too much work. Okay. I'm hoping there's lots of Q&A after this one. The next one we've got coming up in August, our August one over the summer. So I'm well aware that a lot of you may well be on holiday, but hopefully you'll be able to make one of these. And if you came to the speech and language conference that we had in May in Chelmsford, it's a reworking of that. So don't feel that you guys need to come. It will be mostly the same. But if you know colleagues who you think would benefit from hearing what we did in Chelmsford a couple of months ago, this is it. This and September are the ones. So this is part 1. So it's the echolalia, eye contact and beyond. So it's working with neurodivergent children and adults. It's that first portion of the talk that I did before Gestalt language processing, which will be in September. So they're on Wednesday, the 7th of August, and a repeat on Tuesday, the 20th of August. So do come along if you want to do that. So I will stop the sharing now, and probably we will stop the recording as well. But if you have any questions or any comments,